Good morning, everyone. This is Brad Prather with DWD Technology Group. Welcome to our Sage 100 year-end closing webinar. I'm going to wait just maybe one more minute here before actually getting started, make sure that everybody gets logged in. Okay, actually that was a little bit less than a minute, but I am going to go ahead and start our webinar this morning. We do have a lot to cover. My name again is Brad Prather. I am with DWD Technology Group. I have been working here for about 12 years now. I think it'll be 12 years in January. So before that, I was also supporting the Sage 100 or Mass 90. Many of you who have been around for a while have known it as Mass 90, and so I've been with it for a little bit over 20 years now. When I started, actually, it was a DOS-based program. So we'll start here. Going to have a little bit of housekeeping here in the beginning. If you would like to get CPE credit for your webinar, for your attendance this morning, please contact Shannon Barnhart. You see the email address there. Put in the subject line CPE credit, and she can get the necessary information to you. I believe a letter with the title of the webinar and how many hours of CPE credit it is worth. So, and you should all have this in a handout that was sent to you previously as well. Okay. Today's agenda, we're going to talk briefly about DWD. We'll go through some important things to note here at year end. We'll talk specifically about the order of closing the modules and then get into some details about AP, AR, and GL processing. Okay? Real quickly, DWD Technology Group, we are a division of Doolin, Ward, and Dewald, which is a CPA firm headquartered in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We also have locations in Marion and Indianapolis. We have 10 software consultants and 11 network engineers, and there's a picture there on the left of the staff. So it may be difficult to see, but for those of you who have not met me, I've got my cursor right there. There's me kind of on the left hand side there for anybody that I have not met personally yet who's on the webinar. We do the training, support, implementation, obviously, of the Sage 100, as well as a lot of the other services around it, customizations, report writing, integrations with other applications. Here's some of the other things that we do as well: business intelligence, which is basically reporting, ways to get the data out of your system. Power BI is one of the applications we use. There's a product called Sage Alerts and Workflows, which will notify you automatically via email when certain things happen in your database. You can set up those queries to look at your database, and if you have a customer, for example, that goes over 60 days past due, for example, the Sage Alerts can generate an email to both the customer and somebody there in the office to say you're past due, and you can customize that email to say what you want. For your manufacturers in the audience today, we work with the scanning, work order efficiency, warehouse automation, and then there's just a couple of things, integrations, some examples of things we do. We've integrated with all kinds of third-party softwares as well to bring in everything from GL entries to AP invoices to AR invoices and automating that process. Okay? All right. So we're going to start now with the kind of the meat of the webinar here. Also, I guess just a couple other housekeeping items here as well. You may or may not know, everybody in the audience is on mute. Okay, so if you are trying to talk to me, I will not be able to hear you. However, there are a couple sections in your control panel, one called questions, and I think you can also raise your hand in your attendee listing if you want to get my attention. But if you have a question, please go to the question section and type that in there, and then send that to me. And what I'll try to do is keep my eye on that, and either if it's in the middle of what I'm talking about. If it's appropriate to answer it there, I'll try to get it answered there. Otherwise, at the end of our webinar, I will go through the questions and answer them. Okay, so we do want to make this as interactive as possible. A couple acronyms that I want you to know here first. IRD, again, many of you who have worked with the application for a while are probably familiar with this. It's called the interim release download. That is a slight change, again, for those of you who worked with the application for a long time. If you remember, that D used to stand for disk, because we actually used to get those things in the mail on the floppy disks, right? So now it's a download that you can go out. Basically, if you are doing year-end forms, okay, out of payroll or accounts payable, you'll want to download and install that. Okay, that's what 9 times out of 10 is what is putting in the updates for, allowing you to make those connections to do those forms. And then TTU is your tax table update. That's the new tax tables, both federal and state, as they are released. That is also available out on the Sage customer portal for download. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit when we get into the payroll section. Any of you who are sticking around for the second half of this presentation, which is payroll specific, some of the changes that have come with the new version of the payroll. Okay. Okay, here is the supported versions, all right, for Sage 100. So as of December of this year, the last IRD will be released for Sage 100 2017. Okay, so when we say supported version here at DWD, what that means is this is the last version that Sage software is officially supporting. After this date, as you can see here, this will be the last time we can get the IRD for that. There will be no more program fixes, hot fixes, anything like that released for that version or prior versions. So that's what that means when we say supported. DWD Technology Group will support you on whatever version you're on. We still actually have, just FYI, some clients still running the version 3, but we do highly recommend that you do stay current. Do take advantage of the new releases and install them as they come out, so that you can gain all the benefits of the additional functionality that have been added to the software. But there, just so you know, again, this is going to be the last year for the 2017. So if you're on 2017, you may want to think about upgrading. If you're on something before that and need to get out, again, W-2s or 1099s, we'll probably need to talk about upgrading as soon as we can, frankly. Okay. Do you need to install the IRD? As you can see there, 2015 and 16 no longer supported. If you have 2017 product update 2 or 2018 product update 2, those IRDs are included in that. 2019, if you're on that version and that IRD comes out, you will want to install it. Now, there is a caveat here. If you have any extended solutions or modifications to your program, you will want to check with your reseller or with us, if we are your reseller, to make sure that the IRD is going to be compatible with those modifications or extended solutions that you may have installed. Okay? Let's talk about the proper order of closing modules. And let me start this by saying something that you may find to be a little bit strange. But I do want everybody to know that if you are on the more recent versions of Sage 100, that being really anything in the 4-dot versions or the 5-dot versions, there is nothing in the system that requires you to close your modules. Okay? So if you do not close modules, your reports will still run. Your financial statements, you still can prepare those. Your underlying data will still be correct. So There is nothing in the system that will force you to do that. Now, if you do happen to be on one of the older versions I talked about, which starts with a 3, then there are data fields that are affected by closing modules, and you do really need to close. Now, that being said, as a former accountant, and one of the reasons why we're obviously having this webinar is I'm going to recommend very highly that you do close your modules. That is a habit that you get into, and on a monthly basis, you go through these processes in all the modules in closing them, because there are things that do happen. And again, we'll talk about the details of those in some of the modules as far as data being purged from the system and cleanup of some things. So I do recommend very highly that you do that, okay? You'll notice the very first item on my list here is make sure you have a backup before you do a closing, okay? And you should actually make sure you have a backup just in general. I can't tell you how many times I've had people either do a closing, or maybe they were actually doing utility as far as trying to merge maybe some vendors or delete some inventory items or whatever they're trying to do from a utility standpoint. Didn't do exactly what they wanted. And unfortunately, the only way to get out of that is to do a restore from a backup. Okay, there is not an undo when you do any of those kind of things, and there's not an undo technically when you do a closing. And I say technically because we can go back into the options. We can set a period back if we want to a prior period. However, any data that has been deleted or purged during that closing, we cannot get that back unless we do a backup. Okay, real quick, easy way to do a backup. If you go to Library Master, you go to Company Maintenance, and you create yourself a new company. I like to create a company called ZZZ because that company is going to be down at the last one in my list. Create that company, and then in the upper right-hand corner, there'll be a button called Copy. And you can click on that, give you a little warning. You can say OK, and then you can copy your live company into this backup company, okay, or this ZZZ if that's what you created. That's a real quick and easy way to make a backup of your company before you, again, start using any of your utilities, or as we're talking about today, in closing. This is the order. It's kind of a bottom-up closing. So if you were to look at your Sage 100 list of modules, if you have the classic view or even the standard view in the newer version on the left-hand side, and you've got your list of modules, you'll kind of see that the order kind of starts at the bottom and then goes up. Okay, it's not a direct bottom to top, but it's very close. It's a good rule of thumb to remember when you're doing your closing. Okay, and the last one, as you might expect, that you're going to close is going to be your general ledger module. Okay, so you will close all the other modules first, whatever it is that you have, with the general ledger module being the last. And also should note that you do not have to have every module in the same period, okay? So it is fine, one, if you don't go in this exact order, and two, it's okay, for example, to have your accounts receivable module closed for November, for example, and maybe not have your accounts payable module closed yet, okay? And as many of you probably know, especially when you get to year end, your general ledger may stay open even past the typical, 2 or 3 weeks or whatever your closing period is. You may actually even have that be a little bit longer if you're waiting for year-end audit adjustments or review adjustments or anything from your accountant. That's fine. You can keep your modules in different periods. Again, my recommendation is that if you can keep them in the same period as much as possible and close everything on a regular basis, timely manner, and at the same time, that is the optimum way to do that. But if it's necessary to keep a module open, you can do that while closing other modules. Okay? Okay, let's talk specifically then about 2 or 3 of the modules here. But everybody, I'm going to assume has in their installations. And the first one we're going to talk about here is the accounts payable module, okay? One of the things you want to make sure is that you've got all your data entry updated and posted, okay? I mean, I think that's something that you would think would be pretty obvious. So make sure that any AP invoice data entry is posted. And also, if you have any of your related modules, if you have PO, for example, you know that there's a receipt of invoice task within the PO module. So make sure that you have all of those updated and posted as well for that particular month, okay? And do remember, just as an FYI, when you do post data, I mean, all of it goes to whatever that date is. You indicate when you get to the register, and it asks you for the accounting date at that point in time. That's especially important in accounts payable. When you get to this year-end area, make sure that you are posting. You have a batch that if you want to post it into 2019, that is a batch that is separate from any of those APs that might be now in 2019, okay? And one more safety tip I'm going to recommend, normally get at least one call a year where somebody has erroneously posted to 12/31 of the next year. So again, especially important here is year end, as you're kind of bouncing back and forth. You're probably still entering some data in 12/31 of 19. You're still keeping track, or you're still entering data then for 2020 as you're getting, again, invoices and those kind of things. Do make sure that you check that year when you get ready to post, and that you are not posting, in this case, the 12/31 of 2020, okay? Print any of the reports that you want, that you want to keep track of. I recommend, for many of you, if you're not already using the paperless office module, that you start using the paperless office module. You can generate your reports to a PDF format, store them out on your server as opposed to printing them. And I think that's in my opinion, is a great thing to kind of cut down on the paper and all of your filing cabinets full of that information, and you can just file them out there, create a directory out on the server. It is also possible then to go view those reports right back through the paperless office viewer. You can call up that report, double click on it, and bring it right back up on your screen. And if necessary, at that point, you could in fact print it. You could email it to somebody else if they wanted it. There's a number of things you can do. So if you're not using the paperless office functionality, I recommend very highly that you use it, okay? AP aging report, obviously, is one that you probably want to print. Generate AP trial balance. Now let's talk real briefly about the difference between those two. Your AP aging report is going to cut off based on the invoice date, okay? So if you have an invoice dated 12/31 of 2019, but you post it as of 1/1/2020, that invoice will show up on the aging report because it has a date of 12/31, okay? So a couple things. One, your aging report is not the report that you're going to use to reconcile to your general ledger, okay? Because again, it's going by the invoice date. The report that you want to use is the second one, called the AP trial balance, because that one uses the posting date as the cutoff date. So in my previous example of the invoice dated 12/31 but posted as of 1/1/2020, it would not show up on the AP trial balance when I ran it as of 12/31 because it was posted in January of 2020, okay? So that kind of throws people off, especially, again, if you're new to the system. A lot of people will try to run the aging report, try to reconcile that or tie that to the general ledger, and that one is not the one that's going to do that. It is the trial balance, okay? And then, of course, any other reports you want to run, another one we recommend is the check history report, okay? And as I said, there's a whole list of reports on your main menu there that you can run. I don't know if all of you are aware now that you can set up the period end reports that you want to run. So if you actually have some custom reports that you have designed that you would like to run at year end or at any period end for that matter, there is a task that will allow you to enter that custom report, add that to your list of period end reports to run as well. Okay. Here are the reports and analysis that get purged, okay, at year end. Your vendor purchase, your monthly purchase, accounts payable, and then your check history report. So if you can kind of visualize in your AP options, you have a number of months to retain check history, and the monthly fields have a maximum entry of 99 months. So whatever that comes up to be in years, 7 years or something like that, I think, whatever that calculates to. Once we get past that, then those checks that are older than this particular months to retain will be purged from the system. So again, this is why the first step in this process, make sure you have a backup, because once that, again, information is purged, we can't go back and get it back. So again, what a lot of people will do as kind of again, an FYI here, is they will, once they get their, or I should say before closing their live company, they'll make that backup company and they'll give that a name of ABC, you know, for the year 2019, right? And then they'll keep that out there for as long as they have the system, so that if for whatever reason they ever need to get back into something, they can go back into that company that they created before they did their year-end close. Okay. We're also going to have invoices purged from the AP open invoice file and the AP invoice transaction history file, okay, based on the number of days that you specify to keep those. Again, on your daily fields, those are 999 days on a maximum of those, okay? And the check history, as we talked about, that information will be purged. That's a monthly field, and so again, that's 99 months from the check history file, okay? So just again, FYI, once those are purged, once we reach those limits and data starts meeting those criteria, those are out, and you would need to have had a backup if you ever want to go back and get into the history file to see them, okay? Okay, everybody's favorite here, if you are doing 1099s, this is another year-end process, right? So the 1099s for a number of years now have been done by what's called a company called Atrix. And so you should see in your, I believe it's in the reports folder, there should be a form 1099 reporting. When you click on that, that's actually opening up a program that was written by a company called Atrix. And so it is important to note, this program needs to be installed on the workstation that is preparing the 1099s. It does not get installed on the server. It is a workstation specific program, okay? So, and it's a real easy install. So we can certainly help you with that if that's something that you need done. But that does go on the workstation that is preparing the 1099s, and it can be installed on multiple workstations if you have multiple people working on it, okay? You do have to be active on your maintenance, because what happens is when you log into, or I should say when you open up the 1099 reporting, it makes a call out to the Atrix server, and it's looking for if there are any updated forms. And so it will normally, whenever you get into it, it will prompt you to say, especially if you haven't used it since last year, you'll get a prompt to update the forms. Now, I will tell you that it is also updating payroll forms behind the scenes. So even if you do not have the payroll module and all you're doing is 1099s, you will likely, and I can almost guarantee you will get a prompt to update the forms. You should go ahead and say yes to do that. Update them. Nothing wrong with that. Even if the 1099 hasn't changed, you should still go through that process. Okay. The federal copy, as far as I know right now, needs to be on the red pre-printed form. As I did a little research, I did find some notes from some people out there who had said they had submitted it on the non-red form and it was accepted. So I kind of throw that out there with a grain of salt. I did see that noted as I was doing a little bit of research to see on this, but I still think I'd recommend that you use the red forms. The other forms can be on blank. The perforated paper, if you go out and you can go to just about any office supply store and get your blank, 4-part 1099s. And the nice thing about Atrix is it will print the form on that blank sheet. Okay, and it will be all lined up, and makes it real nice from that standpoint. Okay, Atrix, so you know, to print the forms is free. There is no charge. If all you want to do is print forms and mail them yourself and put them in the envelopes and mail the information to the government, to your taxing authorities. If you do all that on paper, there is no charge for that. If you do want to pay for the service, Atrix will actually do everything from exactly what I just said. You can actually pay them so much per form to actually print them, stuff them in envelopes, mail them for you, all the way down to just then electronically filing. And that's a lot of times what a lot of my clients will do, is they will print the forms themselves to send to their recipients, and then they'll use Atrix for the electronic filing piece to submit that information again to the appropriate taxing authorities. I know that in some cases you don't have a choice. I believe if the number of returns exceeds certain number in certain states, I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but I think there are some states and maybe even the federal government that if you have a certain number, you do have to send that information to them electronically. And so if you get in that particular situation, as you're going through the Atrix here, you would just choose that option and it'll walk you through and it'll tell you how much it's going to cost. And you will give them or enter in your credit card number, and they'll charge that, and then they'll again perform whatever service it is you want them to perform. So again, I've had very good luck with that, and recommend that you do that if especially if you have to. I think it's a very good way to go. Okay, actually it's really kind of your only way to go to file them electronically at this point, is through that particular service. Okay, accounts receivable. A lot of this is going to kind of be the same. Again, make sure your data entry is updated. Your corollary or related module in this particular case, one of them is sales order. We do get posting from the sales order module into accounts receivable, so let's make sure that we have all your invoices for the particular period, again, or year updated. If you do finance charges or customer statements, again, go ahead and run those particular tasks. Those are found in the period in processing. And so you can, especially finance charges, apply those based on whatever rules you set up. Okay. Customer statements, if you do those, again, I'm going to do a recommendation for the paperless office if you're not already using it. It will allow you to email those customer statements directly to the recipients that you choose for those customers. So if customer statements are something that you're doing, and if right now you're spending a lot of time printing and folding and stuffing and mailing those, again, give us a call, talk to us, and we'll be happy to help you out with the paperless office. Okay. Same thing here with the aged invoice report and the trial balance report on the AR side. The invoice report cuts off by invoice date, and the trial balance cuts off by posting date. Now, again, as an accountant, those really should not be different on the AR side, in my opinion. You either ship the items and can bill for them by the end of the year, or you didn't. So again, this is my opinion as an accountant. Those really should be the same, because if I have an invoice on 12/31, I should post it as of 12/31, and if I invoice as of 1/1, then it should be posted as of 1/1. So sometimes if you do that, then you can use the aged invoice report to tie to your general ledger. But the system report that definitely should is the AR trial balance, and I recommend again that you run that one and reconcile that, make sure it agrees to your accounts receivable balance in the general ledger. Okay. Here again is a list of reports that contains information that is going to get purged or consolidated. I'm not going to read through every one of those, but you'll see those. Those are primarily monthly type reports. If you ever looked at any of those, that's data that is presented in monthly buckets in general, as opposed to the detail type reports, with the exception of the salesperson commission report, which does give you a detail of commissions by invoice, I think by date, for a particular salesperson. Okay. Very similar on the AR side to what we saw on the AP side. You've got a number of days to retain paid invoices, and so that information is going to be purged from your open invoice file and your transaction payment history file. This is a daily, or one that has a days, is how long you can keep it in days, so that ends up being 999 days maximum, okay? Which again, I think is a little over 2 years. So if you've ever wondered, when you go into a customer and you go into their invoices tab and you see about 2.5 years worth of invoices listed on that invoice tab, that's where this is coming from. That's why that's still out there on that invoices tab, because you have your days to keep that in that open invoice file for these 999 days. So that may be something you want to think about if you're running into that issue with any of your customers. Okay, that's going to purge a monthly cash receipts file. And then if you have temporary customers with a zero balance, those will be purged unless you have selected the option in the AR options to retain those temporary customers. Okay, I will tell you that I can't think actually on the top of my head of any client I work with that still has or is using temporary customers, frankly. Given the fact that the hard drives now are terabytes big, it's not normally a data issue, and most people want to keep all the data they can on their customers, anybody that they've done business with, right? Because at some point in time they may decide that they want to go back out and do a mailer or whatever to somebody that hasn't, purchased from you for a while, even if you thought maybe it was a one-time customer to begin with. So normally, again, I have very few, as I said, I can't think of anybody who's even using the temporary customers. But if, for those who are not familiar, there is a checkbox in the customer file where you can mark them as temporary, and if you do so, when their balance goes to zero, they will be purged out of the customer master file. Okay, so do keep that in mind if you do mark customers as temporary. Okay. All right, so that has been AP AR. Let's continue down. We'll talk about inventory management. For those of you who have inventory management, if you're going to do a physical count, there is an option in that physical count to freeze the inventory and print the physical count worksheets. Briefly, what the freezing of the inventory does is it takes a snapshot of your on-hand quantities at that moment in your inventory module. Okay, so it's going to go out and it's going to say, okay, part number 1, 2, 3 has 10 on hand, 4, 5, 6 has 20, and so on. Okay, so it takes a snapshot at that time that you freeze that inventory, and those are going to be the counts that are going to be compared against when, or that's what I should say, the amounts when you enter your counts. Okay, so here's another thing just to note, FYI, you can continue to enter actually PO and sales order data when your inventory is frozen. Okay. Again, the system will allow you to do that. If you do that, you do have to then adjust your counts, right, to either include anything that you sold in a sales order or exclude anything that you just received on a purchase order, because those do not update that frozen inventory count, okay, because it took a snapshot at that time. It's comparing it to 10. So if you ship 3 of them and write down that you only have 7 on hand, what's going to happen is once you update your physical count, the 3 that got shipped are going to get reduced. Plus, it's now going to make an adjustment for 3 that it says you don't have on hand because it was comparing it to that 10. Okay? So I do want to bring that to your attention. Some people, again, I have some clients that count. They can't absolutely shut everything down. They still need to get some orders out. But you do have to adjust your counts when you enter them then. Okay? And this physical count is an as of count. So I cannot go back and freeze the inventory today for November 30th, for example. Okay? So if I do want to count my inventory, I do need to freeze it on the day that I want counts to count against, right? I don't actually have to count it on that day, but I do have to freeze it so I get those numbers from that day. Okay? I'm going to recommend very highly that on a monthly basis, actually, you run that negative tier report if you have FIFO valuations. That will show you any tiers that have gone negative out there. And if you have any positive tiers, it will merge those together into a single tier and get rid of those negative tiers. This is a report I recommend that you run on a monthly basis, even if you're not doing a physical count monthly. Run that negative tier report, get those things cleaned up, again, on a monthly basis. And it will only merge them if there's enough to absorb that negative tier. So if I've got a positive tier of 15, a negative tier of minus 10, it'll merge those tiers to leave me with the one with 5 on hand now. Okay? So you can get adjustments. You can get adjustments to your inventory if the costs for those tiers are not the same. It's just, is that 15 on hand was at $1 and those minus 10 were at $1.10, then I am going to get a small adjustment that's going to flow through into my inventory adjustment account on the cost of goods sold section. So you do want to take a look at that report before you just update it to see what kind of adjustments you're going to get and to see if maybe you actually need to change your costing in one of those tiers. Okay. Print the inventory valuation report. This is also an as of report. There is an inventory valuation report as of date or by period end, I think, out on the menu as well. You can print that one if you like. I like the inventory valuation report myself, but again, reminder, print that on the last day because that is an as of report, and that report actually should always agree to your general ledger at any point in time. So you can really print that today, go compare it to your general ledger, and they should be in balance. Okay. And what's called the purchases clearing report. Any of you, again, that have inventory, what that is if you buy goods, you receive items, I should say, and you don't have an invoice for them, then those items that have been received but not invoiced go into what's called a purchases clearing account. And then this report will show you in detail the PO, the number of items that have been received, the number of items that have been invoiced if it's different, and then what that translates to as far as the received not invoice amount. That is another report that is an as of report. So if you want to reconcile it to the last day of your year, you need to run it on the last day of your year. Again, I recommend you do these things actually on a month-over-month basis as well. especially that purchases clearing report. It's really easy for that one to get out of whack. For example, if you have received goods in inventory and then erroneously go to enter a invoice in directly into accounts payable, then those items will continue to show as not being invoiced on your purchases clearing, and is never going to come off of those. So, and there are things we can do to correct that. So again, there's actually a whole knowledge base article out there. If anybody's so inclined, go out there and I think type in like purchases clearing reconciliation or something like that. There's a whole knowledge base article to tell you the different steps you can do to correct anything that's gotten into a situation like that. But I recommend highly that you do stay on top of those reports right there. Okay. And then finally, the general ledger. Okay. So again, we want to make sure that everything has been posted. Here's another kind of trick here or tip. The daily transaction register, if you go into the general ledger main folder, the last task in that folder is the daily transaction register, and if you run that, that will actually show you any daily transaction register that hasn't been posted from any module. Okay, so again, I invariably get at least 1 or 2 calls at year end about a whole bunch of data that is missing from the general ledger. We don't have a month's worth of sales in there. I'm not seeing my inventory purchases in the general ledger. I know I've been entering them. And the first thing I will do is say, okay, let's go run that daily transaction register from the general ledger. And fortunately, probably the 99 times out of the 100 that I've gotten this call, it's just been a matter of they haven't been updating the daily transaction register from those subsidiary modules. Okay, so that is a good first thing to check to see if you have anything unposted from other modules. Okay, if you have any recurring journals that you've created, such as depreciation, or maybe you've got a monthly accrual entry that you set up as a recurring journal, make sure that you run and update those, right? And then make sure that all your adjustments have been posted. And so I'm going to go, as I said earlier, especially at year end, this may be one where you have to keep your general ledger open for a little bit, especially at year end. If you are waiting on audit adjustments from your accountant or anything like that, sometimes you may not actually get those till near the end of January, or I've even know some people don't get them until February or whatever it is, and that is fine. Just know that your risk at that point in time is that somebody could, if December is still open, then somebody could enter 12/31 in as a posting date, and it would allow that. Okay. Got a note there that says you can't post into closed periods. I'm going to have a little bit of a caveat there. So let's say, for example, that your current period in general ledger is still December of 2019. Let's say that somebody does try to post an entry to November 30th of 2019. They will, in fact, get a message saying that is a closed period. You cannot post to it. I do want to let everybody know that reopening a period in general ledger is really, frankly, just as simple as going into the general ledger options, setting that period back to period 11, accepting it, and then going to enter that entry. Okay, so I do want to bring that to your attention from a system standpoint. It is very flexible. I do get some questions a lot of times, a little bit of a fear or trepidation in doing a close because they're not quite sure if they're ready and do they have all the information, and I certainly appreciate that, and I do in fact want you to close when you're comfortable and you have all the information. However, do know that if for some reason something comes in after you've closed, you can in fact go back into the options, reopen, post that, and then do a reclose if you want to, or frankly, a lot of times we'll just change the period back to the current period and go forward. Okay, so again, you do have some flexibility from that standpoint to reopen a period and enter information back into it. Okay. If you have budget revisions, update the budget register. I will tell you there is an option, I think, on the budget tab in the general ledger options that does say there was a checkbox in there that said to create the current budget from the current year actuals. You may want to make sure that that is turned off if that is not what you want to do, okay? I have had clients in the past where they have gone through, they have done their own manual budget, spent a lot of time doing it, got it all entered, went and did a period in processing, and because that option was turned on, it did overwrite everything they had done in their budget. They had to go back in and re-enter it. So you might want to make sure you check that out. Again, I believe that's on the budget tab. Turn that off if that's not something you want to do in creating a budget. Okay. Make sure your trial balance is in balance. It does happen every now and then. I again have seen it happen where the debits don't equal credits. It is possible to get some data corruption in the general ledger. We don't like when that happens, but I can't tell you that it never has, and sometimes we do have to go make some one-sided entries to get back in balance. If you've set up any allocations, post those, and then of course your reports. Okay. Trial balance, again, whatever you need to print or generate at the end of a month for the information that you need. These are the ones that are everybody on a month-over-month pretty well does. Your financial reports, again, and FYI, those are the ones that are standard in Sage 100. We do have a couple of other options. There may be many of you out there still using FRX. You probably know by now that it's been discontinued support from Microsoft for a number of years now. However, we have found that it does still work. They'll still do have clients that are using it. And it has continued to work with all the versions we've installed so far. So we have had some issues, a couple places we're running into with some of the newer operating systems. So if you are on FRX, we are going to recommend that you start moving to what's called Sage Intelligence, which is an Excel add-in. It comes with the Sage 100 now, and at a high level, it allows you to pull your data directly into Excel and then format it from there. So you can combine accounts into single lines, whatever kind of subtotals you want, percentages of columns. Once you get the data into Excel, then basically you can do with it what you want from a financial statement presentation. Okay? So again, if you're looking for a little bit more customized financial statements, let whoever it is you work with or give us a call, and we'll be happy to talk to you about that. Okay? What happens when you do your general ledger year-end processing? Your net income, of course, or loss is closed into the retained earnings. And then again, general ledger has years to retain history, summary history, beginning balance, okay, all those kind of things like we saw in the other modules. And again, since those are years, those have a maximum of 99. So depending on what you have set in your year-end processing, that data will start getting purged off of there as well. Okay. So one of the other things I probably should have said in the beginning is one, obviously we said make a backup. Two, if you haven't closed your periods in a while, if that's something that you need to do, then I would also recommend you go into those options and take a quick look and see how long you are saving the data. Okay. Let's make sure that, it's not something like 1 year or 2 years, because again, having done this for a long time now, I've run into just about everything, and unfortunately, again, I've had a client who hadn't done year-end processing and ORNE processing, went ahead and did it, and then later found out that their options to save data had only been set for a year for some reason. So I would recommend that you also take a quick peek at those just to make sure that those are set appropriately. Okay. And then there's that auto budget option that I talked about. Do take a look at that. Make sure that, again, if you are doing budgets, that that's not going to automatically overwrite a budget that you may have just spent a lot of time entering into the system. Okay? All right. We are at about 50 minutes here. I have gone through what I wanted to go through on those particular modules. I have not seen any questions pop up in the questions box. Okay, I am kind of looking through, scrolling through my attendees. Okay, I see that I did get a Ann. Looks like if you meant to, Ann, looks like you raised your hand. So do you have, if you have a specific question, you're able to type it into that question box. I'd be happy to answer that question. Or did you just hit the raise your hand there accidentally? And I am still kind of looking here. Accidentally, okay. So thank you. So Ann did not have a question there. That was just an accident there. Okay. Anybody else have any questions? And again, I don't want to rush anybody here at all. Please let me know. We'll take a couple minutes, or as long as you need to answer those questions. And also just while I'm kind of waiting here to see if anything pops up, just a reminder again, if you would like CPE credit for this particular webinar, you can send the information to Shannon here at DWD, and she will get you set up. Okay?
Brad?
Brad?
Yes. Also, the webinar will be recorded. After the webinar, everybody will get an email with the webinar slides as well as a link to the webinar recording.
Very good. Thank you, Sherry. Also recommend, I kind of said it as well, if you do want to, have specific questions, and you work with one of us here at the DWD, by all means give that consultant a call. Specifically ask for them if you have specific questions about year-end processing. If you don't have a reseller, you're not working specifically with DWD, by all means give us a call as well. Ask for one of our Sage 100 consultants. They'll find one of us who's in. We'll be happy to assist you with whatever those questions are as well. Okay? Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stay on the line. My presentation will continue to run here. We're going to take, it looks like about being about a 5 or 6 minute break. I'm going to get started back again at the top of the hour with our second section, which is payroll specific. So any of you who don't have the payroll module and want to drop off, you can, or if you want to find out about the payroll module, you are certainly welcome to stay. And I would imagine we will probably get some more joining us as well for that. So we will start back again here at the top of the hour around 10 o'clock or so, talking specifically about payroll. And I will still see questions that pop up. So if you think of something and your meeting's still going, you think of something, want to type it in, by all means, please go ahead and do so, and we'll get an answer for you. All right. So everyone who's leaving, thanks for attending. We appreciate your attendance. And for those of you who are staying for payroll, we'll be back again in about 5 minutes to get started. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We're now going to talk specifically about payroll. And we are in a situation where we do have a couple of different payroll versions. So we'll try to note some of that as we're going through the webinar here, this particular piece of it. Again, anybody new who has joined us, wasn't here for the first half of this webinar, there are CPE credit is offered. And if it's something that you would like, then you can contact Shannon Barnhart at our office at that email address. Note CP credit in the subject line, and she can get the appropriate information to you with the number of credits and the title of the webinar and stuff. Also, a reminder here, again, we talked about this at the end of the previous section. This webinar is being recorded, and so when this is done, that recording will be created, and you should receive an email with a link to it as well. Okay, so please note that you will be getting a copy of that. Okay, so here's our agenda for this part of the meeting. Again, we'll take a look at some of the important things to note. Obviously, we're going to talk about the payroll module, specifically year-end payroll processing, which for all practical purposes, year-end is obviously the end of the fourth quarter. It's very similar to a quarterly processing, with the exception of, and a pretty big exception, obviously, is now you're going to do your year-end reporting, your W-2s, that kind of information, right, that you're going to be sending. And so we'll talk about that with the payroll forms with Atrix, and then payroll 2.0, which is the payroll module in what's called the business framework. A number of my clients I've been working with here, updating them to the current version of the payroll module, and it does look different. The databases have changed, the tax processing has changed, and we will talk about that. Okay, so again, an FYI, you should have what I'm going to call a control panel when you logged into the meeting, and there is a section marked questions. And so as we go through here, if you have any questions, please type that into that section. You can then send that to me, and again, if it's appropriate to answer during the section, whatever I'm talking about, I can do that. Otherwise, I may come back and we'll answer those questions at the end that haven't been answered previously. Okay, so again, don't be afraid to ask questions as we go through here, because there is a lot of good information, new information. Okay, just another again real quickly about DW Technology Group. We are a division of a CPA firm, multiple offices, and 10 software consultants with 11 network engineers. I'm going to go pretty quickly through this. We do obviously work with the Sage 100. That's what we're having our webinar in today, and all the software services around that, including report writing, upgrades, data conversion, also integration services with websites, other third-party applications. Okay. Okay, here are some important things to note. Okay, and many of you probably know this if you've been using the payroll module or the accounts payable module for a while. Tax filing 2013 was the last year that Sage maintained the accounts payable in the forms. Okay, as of 2014, all that's been done through a service called Atrix. Okay, it's a company that writes the application, gets installed on the local computer that's preparing those forms, and then those are all generated from there and by them. And again, we will talk a lot more specifically about that when we get to that specific section. Okay, so hopefully we don't even have many of you out there in attendance that are even still on 2014. Okay, all right, this is a very important slide right here, especially for you payroll people. Okay, anybody who's processing payroll, obviously you're this part of the webinar, so you still are doing payroll. So this is very important here. Okay, and so I want to talk about, and I want to make sure that we all kind of understand, especially this middle bullet point here. Okay, but Sage 2017 is still the last version that's been supported. Okay, that is a Sage software. That's how they do things. They will do a current version and 2 prior versions. Okay, so they've done that for quite some time now. So now where this makes this a little bit different for you with payroll is the 2018 payroll is where the new business framework was introduced, and this is where all the major changes were made in this version moving forward. Okay, so when you go to that version, it's going to be a little bit longer of an upgrade, and we may have to do forms and all those kind of things, reports, but that's do need to get you moved to that. Okay, so the last IRD for Sage 2017 is going to be this month, and you will get a tax table update in 2020 for your payroll. Okay, so you can process that payroll in 2017. You will have the information to do that in 2020 to get that. Now, do want to make a note. I want to talk a little bit about this second bullet point there. The W-4 has been changed substantially for the 2020 payroll tax year, and it includes a number of other fields on there to assist with the tax calculation. Okay, and I've got a link down there at the bottom of the slide. It will take you to that W-4 so you can take a look at it. I briefly looked at it. I'm not a payroll expert by any means, but I briefly took a look at it, and I think it's asking some questions about income from other jobs, and if you're an independent contractor, and those kind of things where your employee might need some additional withholding, because they've got outside income that you're clearly not, withholding based on the wages you're paying them, but that they may need additional withholding. So what you need to know is 2017, that version will not include, does not have the ability to enter that information from that W-4, okay? And so if you do process your payroll, if you stay on 2017 and process your payroll, it will calculate the taxes. And that's why I want to make sure that you do understand. The note there says manually calculate. And I want to clarify that. You only need to manually calculate them if you want to be, what I'm going to call 100% correct, right, based on a W-4 that they fill out. So otherwise, it will calculate a withholding tax based on the tax table you have and the number of exemptions you enter for them and things like that. So what I would recommend, well, two things. What I would recommend is, one, you do in fact start moving toward the new payroll and getting on. If you're on 2017, I would recommend that you look to get on to 2019 anyway, again, to take advantage of the new functionality that's offered, especially in the payroll module and the other modules that you may have. It's going to be my recommendation to do that. But you can also then, you could go into the 2017, and of course you could add an additional amount of withholding, or you could bump up their exemptions or down, whichever way you needed to go to more accurately calculate those federal withholding taxes. Okay, so again, do want to bring it to your attention that there are going to be some data fields now on a new W-4 that will not be able to be entered into 2017, and that's why that second note is there. But it will still calculate your federal withholding based on the criteria that you entered in 2017. Okay, so, and again, click on that link and you can take a closer look at that form and see what additional information is being gathered from your employees. Okay, and as I said, feel free to call us, either at one, ask me questions here during this webinar, or call whoever it is that you work with at DWD to get some further clarification or help, or again, get that upgrade on the schedule. And if you are not working with DWD specifically, by all means give us a call as well, and we'll be happy to help you. Okay. I know some of you out there are probably already on Sage 100 2018 or 2019. We are going to get a new release that's going to include the ability to enter that new W-4 information. Should be coming out here mid to late December. Okay. And then, as I said, if you're on 2017 or earlier, you should start the process of whoever you work with. And again, we are happy to work with you to get to the 2018 or 2019. Okay, so that we can, in fact, then start including that information that's going to be on that new W-4. But as I said, it does not have to be by January 1st. 2017 does not break, you will get a tax table update, you will get an IRD, you will still be able to use the 2017, but again, you should start taking some steps to get to the 2019 at this point in time with this new release. It's going to be coming out in mid-December as well. Okay, so anybody on 2017, right, and before, make a backup, okay? Many of you, again, if you've been using the payroll module, you've probably been doing this every quarter, because as you know, in those versions, when you close that quarter, then your quarterly summaries go away, right? Any of those quarterly type data gets zeroed out and starts accumulating for the new quarter. So many of you probably have a number of companies out there, backup companies for the various quarters, okay? If you don't have it turned on, you should check your options in your payroll options. There is an option out there. I do not remember exactly what tab it is on, but there's a perpetual history option. You should turn that on if you don't have that turned on, okay? That will keep track of all of your checks for all time until we delete that out of that perpetual history. And I have been able to use that particular information in the past to recreate quarterly information, because it does have the check detail. You know, we have to do a little bit of digging. We have to write a report to do that. But if you don't have that perpetual history option selected, my recommendation is you do that and start keeping that history from this point forward. Okay. Must close a quarter until you can update the checks in the next quarter. Again, that's a lot of times why we make that copy, so that you can keep that quarter open in your copy, and then you can, in your live company, process that first payroll in January of 2020, right? Because depending on how you pay, especially if you're a weekly payer, you know, your first payroll may be January 1st or so. Well, probably not January 1st since that's a holiday, but it may be January 2nd or 3rd, based on how your pay dates fall. And so that's a lot of time. That is why we do that. We can go ahead and make that copy. You can keep that quarter open in that copy. You can close it in your live company, and then of course process your paychecks in a live company. And then once you get ready to do W-2s or run those quarterly reports, you can go back into that copy that you made. Okay. Now, if you have the excuse me, if you're on the newer versions, with the actually since I don't know, again, about that 2013, 2014 when the payroll came out, the Atrix actually can refer to a prior period, because it's actually reading from some different data tables where it's keeping track of the details of that information. Okay. So we got a couple columns here, and this is kind of what I referred to in the beginning. We've got the pre-2018 version, and we've got the 2018 and after version. Okay. So your pre-2018, as I said, your quarter to date get reset. Well, obviously at the year end, your year to date stuff gets reset. Quarter specific will only show the current quarter. Your check history file will be purged. This is why I like to turn on that perpetual, because again, that information is retained. That one we have to purge manually. So again, if you do not have that perpetual history turned on, please turn it on. Terminated employees, deleted based on the rules of how long we're going to keep them. And then of course it rolls over to the new quarter and year. Okay. And a lot of the same things happen on the new version as well. But now we've got the records in history there, similar to the other modules, where now we say how many years we want to keep that data, and then it will purge that for us out of those files, okay, based on whatever it was that we said we wanted to keep it. And again, it's still going to update to the new quarter once we do this processing. Okay. Printing forms on Atrix, we do need to be on 2017 or higher, and that's because there will be an interim release download That will be coming out again probably in mid to late December. And that's normally one of the things that interim release download does, is it gives you the ability to print your forms via Atrix, okay? And that will only be released for 2017 or after, okay? The federal and state e-filing must be installed on the computer. That is a local install. So it can be installed on multiple computers. It doesn't just have to be on one. Anybody who's going to be doing the Atrix forms have that installed on there, and you must have a current Sage 100 maintenance plan, okay? What's going to happen when you get into Atrix? If it's been a while since you've gotten into it, you are probably going to be prompted for an update, and you should go ahead and say yes, you would like to update, okay? And that will then go out and it downloads all the updated forms. Most of those, and you can kind of see it as it goes flying by, are going to be state related, and they may be even states that you don't even deal with. But there's not at this point there's not a way to do a state specific download. You really just have to do them all. So again, once you get that prompt, I recommend you do it. You may find that once you get into January, when you start getting ready to prepare your W-2s, you may find that every time you open up Atrix, you get another prompt to download, because again, some state has made a minor change and they're pushing that out, okay? So go ahead again and go ahead and do the update. The forms typically that you're going to do is obviously your 940, your annual federal unemployment, your 941, which would be the fourth quarter return, right, as well as then your W-2s, okay? You can print those without pre-printed forms. That means if you go out and just buy the perforated paper, the 4-part, I believe it is, it will print all the lines and all the verbiage on there for your W-2s, okay? And you can e-file those as well. So for any of you that have gone through the process, you open up the preparer, you go through, you make your any corrections you might need to do. If you have missing Social Security numbers, it will warn you about that. It'll tell you have missing Social Security numbers, you have data that needs to be changed, or it's not correct. It'll flag you, but you will eventually get to a point where it's going to ask you what you want to do. You can, without any cost at all to yourself, other than the forms, I guess I should say, in your time, you can print everything, and there are no additional charges for that. Again, as I said, other than the cost of your forms and the time that you're spending to do that, right? Or you can choose, actually, you can select to have Atrix do all of it, frankly. They have an option where they will print and they will mail and they will send out and do all of that for it's normally a per form or per employee charge. Or you can do a combination of both. And again, that's typically what my clients do. Is they will print their own forms. They will typically distribute those to their employees on their own, whether they just hand them to them in the office or they actually mail them or whatever that may be. They will typically do that on their own, the printing section, and then they will choose to then just e-file those forms, or that information, I should say, with the appropriate taxing authorities electronically. Okay, and so again, that's on a per employee charge. It's right there in the menu. You select it, and then walk through the wizard. And they will prompt you for a credit card number and charge you, and then you can e-file it. Okay, so you should plan on, if you're going to e-file, you should probably really plan on having that information submitted to them, 4 or 5 days before January 31st, right? And that's one of the things this menu will tell you, that if you want that to be submitted within 4 or 5 days, I think there's no charge for that. But if you start getting into that rush kind of situation where you want that submitted that day or 2 days or something, I think there's additional charges for that. So you really should plan on having your file submitted to them 4 or 5 days maybe even a week before the January 31st. Okay. State forms, those are all within the Atrix as well. There's the Indiana. Majority, obviously, of our clients are Indiana-based, and so there's the forms that we typically, the UC1 and then the WH1 and WH3. But again, I work with some clients in Ohio and Illinois, and whatever forms are required by those states, those will be options. Select those. You can do the same thing here, as we talked about with the federal. You can print those without, having to have a pre-printed form. You can print those to plain white paper. Again, most forms are perforated. They have multiple copies of them, and so if you buy the appropriate, again, 4-part perforated paper, in general, that's what most of I know the federal is a 4-part form. If you buy that, that'll print all the lines and the headers and everything on that paper itself. Okay. Same thing as with the federal. You can do a combination here. All the way you can let Atrix do everything, or you can do a combination where you print the forms, again, disperse those to your employees, and then just e-file with Atrix. We do know in Indiana now, and actually has been for a while, if you have 25 or more, you must e-file those. Most states, again, I am not a payroll expert, but it's come to my attention with working with multiple clients that most states now do have some kind of number, if you are over that number, that they want you to, electronically file those forms. So, again, if that's the case, then that's what the option you select with the Atrix. There will be a charge for that. Again, typically it's a per form, I should say, per employee charge, and you'll walk through the wizard credit card, and they'll electronically file it for you. Okay. Again, recommendation: don't wait till the last minute. They do require normally a lead time. They have a guaranteed kind of thing. They'll file it within the next, again, I want to say 4 to 5 days kind of thing. So do make sure that you give yourself some time, and don't try to submit that file on January 31st for filing on January 31st. Okay. We talked about earlier, this is just kind of a repeat, the updates. The IRD, or the interim release download, it is normally in December here, again, mid to late December. The other reports are automatic. Do make sure that whoever is logged in does have the ability, does have some administrator privileges to that computer to install those updates. I do run into that every now and then, where you get the prompt to update the forms, and then it errors out because the person who has logged in does not have administrator rights. So depending on your IT department and security, you may, if they don't want to do that, you may need to have somebody with administrator rights log into that computer, get that prompt to do the update, go ahead and do the update, and then let you log back in so you can then prepare the forms. Okay, but keep that in mind. That may happen when you try to do that. You do have to have an active maintenance plan with Sage. This is what you'll get. Got some screenshots here. Once it asks you if you want to update, you'll get this screen here. You can click on OK. You can then click on again, my recommendation is an automatic update. If that doesn't work, then do try the download. Again, if we are having some security issues, sometimes it's not necessarily the user that's logged in. Sometimes the port, there's a port number that information is being transmitted over. Sometimes if that port is not open, you'll get an error message as well. And I've been able to use the download update to get that update downloaded and then run the install directly from the workstation. Okay. Again, if you run into some of these issues, we are happy to help you with resolving those. There's also a knowledge base article out there on the knowledge base specifically about issues with updating Atrix that will tell you exactly the steps to go through to to resolve those. So, an FYI, this is kind of a public service announcement. If you don't have a login to the customer portal, I recommend very highly that you get one. Somebody in your organization has one, because there's a lot of good information out there on that customer portal, including these interim release downloads that we're talking about, the tax table updates, and again, the knowledge base is a great resource a lot of times for error messages that you might run into. So again, we are happy to assist you with getting that login set up, and like you tell Sage, give them your email address, and you can then create a username and password, and basically away you go. Okay, and here you go right here. Here's some of the recommendations that are on that knowledge base entry. Okay, most of it has to do with permissions and security type things that are set up on your network, not allowing that information to run. And I get that. There's obviously a lot of dangerous stuff out there on the internet, and if you just allowed everything to come through, certainly that's not what your IT department wants either. So again, here are some of the things that you'll find on that knowledge base entry. Okay, so again, I'm not going to read every single thing on this slide here. You can kind of go through these if you run into issues with updating your Atrix. Okay, and again, there's the customer portal that we talked about. Okay, and this will get you access to the downloads, latest hot fixes or product updates, or versions for that matter, can be downloaded, as well as the knowledge base. Okay, so it's that link right there to customers.sagenorthamerica.com. Again, I'm going to recommend very highly that you have at least one person in your organization that has access to that login. And frankly, I think it's appropriate really for anybody who uses the Sage 100 within your organization to have a login to it to get to access, especially a knowledge base, for example. So, but that again is up to you as to who you want to allow to do that. Okay. All right, let's talk about our payroll 2.0. Okay, that's what Sage is calling it. Payroll 2 right now. It's 2.19.4, I believe. So as an FYI, if you have the payroll module, it is now a separate download and installation actually from the Sage 100 2019. So when we are doing these upgrades now, or even our new installs, there is a download for the Sage 100, the program files, the general ledger, the accounts payable, the AR, all that information, as well as then a download for the payroll, which is completely separate. Okay. There have been a number of changes in it. These are a few here. Updated data entry screens. One of them that I have found to be quite helpful is now payroll can be entered in batches. And so if you have multiple departments or locations, for example, which I have a couple clients who do, in the past, they have had to do their payroll separately, right? So location 1, they would have to go through and process all their payroll, and then they were done. They could call location 2 and say, okay, now you guys can get in there and process yours. Now with the batches, we can do those separately, just like any other data entry screens that you have batches turned on. Okay, so that's been real nice. All the reports are now crystal-based, where they have not been in the past. So now that means we can customize those. And probably one of the biggest changes, again, it's a pretty significant change all the way around, is your tax tables are no longer saved on your server. Okay, so this is all cloud-based now from a tax calculation standpoint, so you do not have to worry about updating the tax tables once you get on the new version. What you would have to do, really at this point, the only thing you will have to keep track of, at least that I've found so far, is your specific unemployment tax rates. If you are subject to unemployment tax on the federal level as well as the state, those you have to maintain because clearly that's unique to you as an organization. Otherwise, Sage now has what we're calling the tax groups, or what they are calling tax groups, and that is a list of all the taxing authorities in the United States for payroll taxes. And so you select the tax group that your employee belongs to, and then there's a checklist of all the taxes that they could be subject to from federal, state, and local. You turn those on, and then once you run a payroll, it takes that information, sends it up to their servers, calculates the taxes, and sends it back. Okay? So that is, I'm going to go, see if I can go, whoops, I want not the caps lock on, got a little bit ahead of myself here. Let me go back to talking about the 2.0 again, okay? Because we really want to get anybody who is still in 2017, we really need to get back to, I apologize for the, there we go. Okay, on to the 2.0 there for the for your payroll. Okay, because again, 2017, this is going to be the last time that you're going to be able to do that. Okay, what I'd like to do here before I take any questions is I do want to, if you will bear with me for just a second, I'm going to go ahead and open up real quickly my Sage 100 in the version 2019, and we'll just give you a real quick look at what that looks like, so you have a little bit of idea for anybody who has not seen it yet, or if you haven't upgraded to it. It'll mean a little bit more to you, I think, to actually take a look at it. And of course, I can't talk and type in my username and password at the same time. So we'll get this opened up here, and we will take a look at the payroll module. Okay. Okay. That's fine. I do not need. Okay. So you'll notice here that the employee maintenance screen is going to look a lot different. I've got a lot more tabs across the top here now. Got a lot more information I can keep track of here. Okay. Here is where one of the big changes that we talked about right here, and we talked about the tax, the way we tax now. Now we tax by tax groups. Okay. And we can also do things as well as whether it's a residence, whether it's a work tax, okay, the dependent exemptions. For those of you in Indiana, we now have the ability to enter that SOC code, which I believe was actually became required in that third quarter. When you filed that third quarter report, I think everybody had to do that manually, but now that is also included in the employee maintenance, okay? I think we have up to, when we go to pay, we can enter up to 9 pay rates now, okay, in our employee. Also, as far as benefits are concerned, we can calculate our benefits. I want to show you here again, kind of real quickly what I was talking about down in your setup now. As far as the tax, we do not have a tax table. But we have what are called the company tax groups. And if I do my lookup here, this is what I was talking about. You will see now what Sage has provided is states, and then every taxing authority within that particular state, okay? So any of you who were in Ohio, or if you are in Ohio, many of you probably have the multi-local concurrent taxes. That was an enhancement that you had to have to be able to do a school district tax, the ability to do a city tax, county because there was more than one local tax. That functionality is now included in the new version of the software. Okay, so you will no longer need that enhancement, and you will choose the appropriate tax groups then based on your employees. So again, if I was to go down here and look for my Indiana, what we have now is we have all the Indiana counties listed in here for taxes. Okay, and then we go to our tax profile, and this is kind of our building block here where we put this information together. So for example, I've got one set up here for Marion County, and I'm being taxed at, or my example, this employee in Marion County is all the federal taxes, then the regular resident taxes for both Indiana and Marion County. Okay, and we could set up another one if they were a non-resident, and then just select those boxes to make that a non-resident tax. But as you can see, I'm not actually keeping track of the tax rates anymore. Okay, so now once I process that payroll and I've got this information in there for my employee, it's going to take this, it's going to take the exemptions that I've set up, whether I want any additional amounts, withheld, any of that kind of stuff. That information will go back up now to the cloud server, calculate the taxes, send it back. So if Marion County decides that on January 1st they're raising their tax rate to 2% from whatever it is now, then I don't have to worry about that because they will have updated their servers, and that will be now calculated at that new tax rate. Okay. I do have a question that has come in here. Where do you go to enter update the unemployment tax rate? Very good question. So if I go into my company tax group setup, and in this case, again, I'm going to use Indiana as my example. This is where I do two things. One, this is where I set up my general ledger account numbers, and I would do the same thing for my federal. I would just type in Fed, but this is where I type in my general ledger account numbers, and then I've got the tax rate tab right here where I set up my Indiana. Here's the nice thing about this as well, which is new functionality. So let's say that my tax rate, as of right now is, I got to put in an effective date, is 1%, okay? And then I find out that, I get my notice, actually I think Indiana's on a July 1st maybe, but regardless, I go in here and I can say my new effective date is going to be 1/1 of 2020, and now it's going to 1.5. I can go ahead and enter that, and now once it changes over to 2020, it will now start applying that rate for me, okay? So I don't have to, in the old version here, I've got to get my rate changed before I process the first payroll, and they notified me that my rate changed 3 months, in advance, as they most, that they'll do. But now I got to make myself a note to say, okay, remember to change the rate before you process the first payroll, after this date, right? Now I can go in here and just put an effective date to it. So that was a very, very good question. That's where that gets entered in the new version. Okay. I will say this. I'm going to go ahead and say yes to that. That's fine. There is in my setup. I know there's a little bit. I get this question, and look, this is a something that can happen. I mean, we do now have tax calculations in the cloud. Look, it is possible that their servers could go down. I mean, they've got all kinds of stuff set up so that if they do, they've got redundancy, and it'll, there'll be other servers and those kind of things. But, that is a possibility. And so one of the other things that's been added is there's what's called a service notification maintenance. And so, you set this up. Who do you want to be notified if there is any issue with this particular service? Okay, if the service does happen to be down, who needs to be notified about that? we're working on the issue, get them back up just as soon as possible. But if you're having issues, you know, we can't calculate taxes right now. So that is a potential that could happen. So do need to make you aware of that. Okay. So if you are on a prior version of the Sage 100, specifically Sage 100 2017 or previous, again, as I said, I'm going to recommend that you do start making plans to upgrade. A lot of times what we're doing with our clients, especially depending on the complexity, what state they're in, we will do an upgrade, kind of a two-step upgrade. And so we will do an upgrade, we'll install the program, we'll migrate data, we'll convert it, and then we will ask you to go into that company and process a payroll, you know, process your payroll in 2017, whatever version you're using, and then re-enter that date information into the new version and make sure that the payroll is calculating correctly, okay? So that we can find out whether we make sure that we got everything set up correctly, right? So I will tell you, I don't expect it to be to the penny, but the ones I've done so far, any differences have been due to rounding. I mean, you know, the county tax in the old version was different from the county in the new version by a couple cents. And so we were not concerned about that. Okay, so that's kind of what we've been doing, or at least making that recommendation that if you do this upgrade, you maybe think of doing it in a couple steps. Again, where we do all the install, then you have an opportunity to test. If you have custom forms, those custom forms will need to be rewritten because, again, the underlying database has changed. We still have an employee master file, but if nothing else, it's been given a new name. So we at least have to link to that new table and point to those new data fields in your custom report. So you may have to do some of that, okay? Okay, got another question here. January 1 is date for setting county. If employee moves to a different county on January 2nd, can you set it so it uses, I'm assuming, the new county here? Why can't I read that? Oh, starting the next year. So it uses the new county starting the next year. That I do not believe that you can do. I think I see what you're saying is, do I have an effective date? That question seems to me to be, do I have an effective date for my counties as well? Let's go back and take a real quick look at that question. I'm not aware of that being the case, but let's take a look. If I go into my employee maintenance and I look at my taxes, I suppose what I could do, we might have to do a little bit of testing here on this. What I may be able to do, I do not have a date in here. I do not have an effective date. But what I may be able to do, and again, I would want to do some testing, but as a kind of the off the top of my head kind of thing, maybe we could add a new tax profile in here and just not make it the default, right? And then once that January 2nd, we would have to come back in here and then click this one off as, take this one off as a default and make this one the new default now. So that may be the way to do that. Again, I would want to do some testing on that one to see if that would actually work for me, okay? But that may be a possibility there. But I do not have an effective date is kind of the bottom line there, okay? Okay, so those were a couple questions there regarding anybody else. Apologize for my email popping up there. Thought I'd turn that off. Again, now my forms are all in Crystal Reports, so I can modify any of my forms directly. Reports, I guess I should say, all my reports now are in Crystal. So any of these reports, just like we can in the other modules, can be modified. Couple of other real quick notes here. Now both in my earnings code maintenance and in my deduction code maintenance, what I do is I now assign a tax rule to that earnings code. The other thing is as well, the earnings code is now 6 characters long as opposed to 2. So any of you who have struggled with trying to think of a 2-character earnings code for whatever it is you're paying, we can now have up to 6 characters there. We also have one of the tax rules in here is expense reimbursement. So now instead of a negative deduction, I know in the old version, a lot of times what we did is we did a negative deduction to get a expense reimbursement, because obviously it's not a wage of any kind. I can actually set that up and then assign this tax rule of expense reimbursement, as well as a lot of your non-taxable or your taxable fringe benefits. I can also set those up as well. Okay, so then they will be properly taxed. Okay, so that's a part of your conversion to the new system. And then we do the same thing in our deduction code maintenance. We assign a tax rule for my pension plan or cafeteria type deductions. So there's a pension plan type deduction of 401k. And so again, I've got a number of tax rules out there that I've assigned to it. And then again, what's nice about this is, if you know, in your old version, if you're still in the old version, you know that there's that section where you have to go in the taxes button and you have to say, you know, is it included in federal tax? Is it not included in federal? I mean, you check the boxes, right? Now we don't have to do that anymore. So we give this the rule of the employee deduction, okay, 401k. And if on January 1st, Congress says 401k deductions are no longer deductible from income, we don't have to do anything. They'll change it on their end. It'll no longer be deductible from income, and away we go. Okay, so that's one of the nice things about that. Okay. All right, I'm about 55 minutes in here, 50 minutes, a little bit short of an hour here, kind of planned on an hour. Does anybody have any more questions? We got a couple there. I want to make sure that we still have some time for questions. I'm going to kind of scroll through my attendees list here. I can see who asked the questions. There were a couple, I got those answered. Don't know if anybody raised their hand during this particular one or not. Okay, let's make sure then I'm going to go back down to my questions. I'm going to scroll through those, make sure I haven't missed one. Again, we had the one on the moving the county and the unemployment tax rate. Anybody else with any questions on what we talked about any of this? I'm going to go and get back into I didn't want to do that. Oh, that's fine. Any more questions? I want to get the slide back up here real quickly with Shannon's information on there if you need to. Again, as a repeat for your CPE credit, okay? There's the information there. Send a quick email to Shannon. She will get that information to you. As a quick reminder as well, this webinar was recorded. Once this meeting is done, sometime later today, maybe tomorrow, a link will be sent to you with a link to that recording, so you can also go back and watch that as well if you like. Okay, I'm going to check my questions one more time to see if anybody has one. I do not see any. I have one more opportunity. If you want to type in a question, if you don't, and again, if you would like to individually talk to somebody, if you normally work with somebody at DWD, by all means, give them a call directly. Talk to them. If you want to call and ask for me, Brad Prather, I'll be happy to talk to you, or just ask again for one of our Sage 100 consultants. Any of us will be happy to talk to you about any of the stuff that we talked about in our year-end webinar, or just anything about Sage 100. If there's, frankly, if there's any other kind of questions you have, issues you're running into, again, please feel free to give us a call and chat with us. Okay. All right. I'm looking one more time. I do not see any questions. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you all again for attending. Thank you all, and everybody have a great day. I'm now going into meeting. Thank you much.